Joining me now is Senator Chris Coons, Democrat from Delaware, member of said Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Senator, thank you for coming on. It's good to see you.
Great to be with you, Chuck.
Let me start with the decision to deploy troops. You know, a lot of time, at what point do you think the president should be getting advice from Congress or Congress's, acceptance of deploying troops like this? At what point do you think he needs to go to Congress?
Look, I think it's important that the President, the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State consult with the Armed Services and Foreign Relations Committees. The President and his senior team have been doing that regularly. Within the scope of his powers as Commander-in-Chief, the President has the authority and the ability to deploy troops, particularly to our NATO allies, and in the face of a demonstrable threat to the region and the region's stability from Putin's aggressive stance towards Ukraine. But I think one of the things we've been seeing President Biden and his senior team do very well is to pull together our NATO allies, Canada, the United States, and the Western and Central European nations, and push back on Putin. I think Putin was testing Biden, testing NATO, testing the West, and I think he's been surprised at how forcefully and quickly we're coming together. It's not just American troops who are being deployed. It's French, it's British, it's Polish, it's a dozen other countries are forward deploying assets.
You know, it's interesting on the issue of getting everybody together. It does, in hindsight, not punishing Putin very well for Crimea, for getting involved in our election, for everything he did. Did it lead to this point? I mean, it's just one of those things. Okay, now everybody realizes the threat that he is. In hindsight, was it a mistake for all the light punishments in the past?
Look, my view of Vladimir Putin has always been that he will only stop when we stop him. In 2008, he invaded and still occupies 2 sections of the country, Georgia. He also later invaded and still occupies a portion of the country, Moldova. In 2014, as you said, Chuck, he invaded and later annexed Crimea, and he's been supporting Russian separatists since 2014 in the Donbass. I think we need to send as strong and clear and decisive a deterrent signal now as we can. I think that started when President Biden came into office. Remember, his first trip overseas was to go to Europe to meet with our NATO allies and to go to Geneva to sit toe-to-toe with Putin and be clear with him what cyber intrusions in our country, our infrastructure, our elections would mean, and what aggression towards our NATO partners and Eastern Europe would mean. And I think he's marshaling an appropriate and forceful response.
Well, he has attacked us. He has done cyber attacks already in this country. And it goes to the issue of punishing Putin now. He's holding a country hostage, and we've not leveled any sanctions. Why?
Well, I think the sanctions that we are building European support for would be the toughest sanctions ever imposed on Russia. It would have costs and consequences for some of our closest partners. Germany's new Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, will be here Monday to meet with President Biden. And I'm certain the ongoing reliance of most of Eastern and Central Europe, including Germany, on Russian gas supplies is a key part of that conversation. That's also partly why President Biden met with the Emir of Qatar on Monday of this week. His country is one of the largest global providers of liquefied natural gas. The president and his team are making solid and thoughtful moves to provide deterrence against Russia and alternatives in the event Russian aggression leads to our imposing great and strong and tough sanctions, and it has consequences for the economies and the energy supplies into our partners in Europe.
I'm curious, is there any I'm curious if you're seeing a divide inside your Republican colleagues in the Foreign Relations Committee. I saw Senator Mike Braun put out a statement saying he was opposed to President Biden's decision to send some troops to Eastern Europe. Senator Lindsey Graham was very much in favor of it. I know there's a bit of a divide on the right. In the Foreign Relations Committee, how unified is everybody on pushing back on Russia? Are there a handful of Republicans arguing against this?
My impression, Chuck, is there's only a few members of the Republican caucus, let alone the Foreign Relations Committee, who are following what I'll call the Tucker Carlson line, which is questioning why we should do anything to defend Ukraine, why we should be deploying troops, why NATO is essential to our security. But the vast majority of Republicans that I've heard from or that have spoken up in hearings, I just came from a several-hour-long hearing with Secretary Blinken and Secretary Austin. I'm not hearing a lot of voices that are saying from the Republican caucus we shouldn't be reinforcing our allies in Europe.
In fact, it's a weird divide, right? You have a small group saying one thing, and then you have others who think we haven't been aggressive enough, right? Who would actually like to see sanctions already. I think Marco Rubio arguably is probably in that category. Is there a chance we level sanctions before Putin does something in Ukraine?
Chuck, what I think we will end up taking up and passing through the Foreign Relations Committee will be a robust package of sanctions that Chairman Menendez has already put together, but he and Senator Risch, the ranking member, are working closely on. I think that Putin and Putin's Russia have already engaged in enough aggression against Ukraine in recent weeks and months to justify some sanctions now, but we should hold off on the most devastating, the most significant sanctions to use them as a deterrent against any further invasion of Ukraine.
Let me ask you about your colleague, Ben Ray Lujan. We obviously are all hoping for a speedy recovery. It's the reality of a 50-50 Senate, though. What does this mean for the next month? I saw one report that basically says, look, some Senate business can go on, but probably not the controversial stuff.
Look, anytime the Senate is this closely divided, every single one of us, should we not be able to be here and vote, can potentially change important outcomes. I reached out to my friend and colleague Ben Ray to just express my concern, to tell him that my wife and I have him in our prayers, and to express my hope that he will be fully recovered and returning soon. But any one of us, if we are not able to be here, whether through COVID or a family emergency or a change in life circumstances, would have a big impact on important votes like the Supreme Court confirmation that's on our horizon here in the next few weeks or months.
Does this clarify your Senate conference a little bit here that, hey, you know, you may only have a finite amount of time to govern if you whether it's the president's agenda, Build Back Better, what was formerly known as Build Back Better, Supreme Court or the electoral reform. I mean, it seems to me, does this focus the mind, do you think?
Chuck, what I would hope would focus the mind of my colleagues is what we hear back home week in and week out. Folks who are eager for us to fix the Postal Service, to deliver more support for restaurants and gyms and small businesses, to make sure that what we're doing is helping our schools open and operate safely and support educators and support teachers and parents and students. I hope that would be the source of our urgency about moving forward the president's agenda. But to answer your question directly, yes, a sense of the fragility of our majority should add some added oomph to that focus and that energy.
Senator Chris Coons, Democrat from Delaware, always good to get your perspective. We know you have a lot of the president's ears at times as well. Appreciate you coming on, sharing your perspective.